Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Mookie Betts with the Driveline, and we talk about what they told him, and then we get into a question from a listener about some guys that are going to be competing this spring. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you never want to miss a day, because we're not going to, you can simply subscribe in those places and get it sent directly to you. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio. I'm usually joined by a co-host, Jeff Snider, but Jeff is out today, so I'll be going solo dolo. We're both lifelong Dodger fans that currently cover the Dodgers, have spent a lot of time at Dodger Stadium throughout our lives, and we're not quite insiders, but we're here to bring you what we think is relevant to talk about the Dodgers, the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning for about 30 minutes. And that's what I'm here to do today. Players are already in Arizona for the most part. We've seen a lot of the Dodger players, even though full teams haven't. It's not mandatory for full teams to be there yet, but we've seen pretty much all the Dodgers, which is par for the course for the Dodgers. Most of the time they have the full guys there when pitchers and catchers report. No real news in the sense of anything that happened other than Alex Reyes, David Peralta, and Jimmy Nelson. All those deals were made official, and JP Fireeyes, Blake Treinen, and Walker Buehler all went on the 60-day DL, which is 60-day IL, which is basically what we expected. Daniel Hudson, we learned that his ankle issue is ankle tendonitis. It says coming from some of the exercises that he did while rehabbing his torn ACL. He's hopeful to be ready for opening day. We'll throw a bullpen, so we'll continue to monitor him, and we'll see what happens there. The other note is Jimmy Nelson has no restrictions. Dave Roberts said he'll be full go, and he'll be competing for his spot to a certain extent, but he signed a major league deal, so basically competing for his role. And yeah, so that's good news on the Jimmy Nelson front. Solid news on the Daniel Hudson front if he thinks he can still be ready by opening day. Mookie Betts spoke to reporters. Mookie Betts talked a little bit about the World Baseball Classic. Basically said that Mike Trout's the one that hit him up and asked him if he wanted to play or told him if he wanted to play. And Mookie Betts said, yeah, because him and Trout don't really get to share the field. So he thought it would be cool to share the field and play for Team USA. So that's where he's at there. But the biggest thing Mookie Betts talked about was going to Driveline this offseason. Driveline, one of the analytical / sports science type places that kind of look at where they can help you. The interesting wording that Mookie used is that he went there because his employer told him to, which kind of implies that he wouldn't have went there had the Dodgers not asked him or told him or whatever the word, however the Dodgers got it to him that they wanted him to visit Driveline. Just thought it was interesting wording, but either way, Mookie went there and they told him basically that he needs to get a little bit stronger. So Mookie put on about 8 to 9 pounds over this offseason. I would imagine some more muscle than anything. And then he said, quote, losing weight equates to losing strength. I was just little, man, so I had to gain my weight back. Mookie Betts lost some weight a few years ago, back when he went vegan for a little bit, and then he wanted to state on the record that he is not vegan anymore. He hasn't been vegan for a few years now. But either way, putting on muscle, he said there's only one way to find out if the weight gain has worked, but so far I definitely have gotten a lot stronger and beefed up a little bit, so we'll see how it goes. If you saw the Dodgers social media a week or so ago, Mookie Betts was going or recorded an episode with Kevin Hart when they're sitting in the cold tubs, and Mookie did look a little jacked. So it makes sense that that was the reason why, or it makes sense that that's why it maybe appeared that he looked a little bit jacked. So yeah, Mookie Betts, He is a small guy in general, but I do believe that, you know, in certain areas you can beef up in order just to be prepared for the regular season. Because in the regular season, you're not necessarily going to put on weight. If anything, you're going to lose weight or maybe lose a little bit of muscle, depending on which workout routine is or whatever during season. So I don't mind this. I know, if you remember, Cody Bellinger came in, put on some muscle, I believe after maybe the 2018 season or maybe after 2019 season. I don't remember which, but and then he struggled, and maybe people attributed to, oh, he got too strong. Mookie knows his body. Not no shades Cody Bellinger, but I think Mookie knows his body a little bit and knows his swing, and has a better overall grasp of himself, a little bit more than Cody Bellinger. And, if Mookie felt that being able to put this weight on without affecting his swing or without affecting his playing, then I trust Mookie to, be handling that. And for some, Mookie had over 30 home runs last year. Mookie had a really great season, top 5 in MVP voting, but he did have a little bit of a weird season at the plate. He was started off really slow. Remember, he only hit like one home run through the first month of the season, and then he had a really bad June, and then he supplemented that with really good other months. He had some hot months. But when asked about the ups and downs, he said, "I'm honestly not sure. It definitely wasn't from lack of effort. So I just continue to control the things I can control. That's putting in work and playing hard on the field. After that, that's really all you can control, and you just go have fun after that." So, yeah. Do I think, Mookie's all of a sudden going to hit, 40, 50 home runs? No, but I do expect him, and it's not like he's been injured, so it's not like a matter of, oh, I expect him to hold up. Mookie's been pretty healthy throughout his career, and especially with the Dodgers. But having that extra muscle on there, I'm sure can help in certain areas, and especially exploding into a baseball. So, maybe the power numbers might be up there a little bit, or maybe he, last year it was weird because he started the season slow and then he had the slow June, but that's not really correlated to being tired or being fatigued or just the work, the grinding of the regular season. I think it's just a matter of, he was hot a few months and cold a couple months. But yeah, I don't think there's too much to gain here from Mookie Betts putting on this weight, other than Mookie's going to look a little bit better with the shirt off, and it might equate to a little bit more power at the plate. But baseball is weird where you need to know, and I'm sure Mookie does, you need to know where you're putting on your weight in order to help you out. You can't, there's not too many players that are just out here looking jacked or looking like they're going to be in a fitness competition. Gabe Kapler back in the day, and even currently one of those guys, but Gabe Kapler wasn't, an MVP candidate and the top all-star. So, baseball is a little different where you don't necessarily need that beach body. You just need to have muscle in the right places. And, Mookie Betts did that. And we'll see what happens. And we'll see if it causes anything. I know if he does and if he does struggle out of the gate, I know just with the way he worded, my employer told me to go there. I wouldn't say he's going to blame Driveline, but I think he might have something in the back of his head like, man, I should have just stayed doing what I was doing because I was doing pretty good. But either way, that's the Mookie Betts update. And that's it on that front. We got a question from a listener that's going to talk about position players and pitchers and spring training and competition. That's what's on tap. First, let's talk about Built Bar, because today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, and you got to try a Built Bar. You can use them for whatever you need if you're going to the gym and putting on muscle, if you're going to the gym to try to lose weight, if you need a snack throughout the day, if you want a better alternative to dessert rather than ice cream or cookies or cake or something like that. Built Bars are there for you. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, so you got that great chocolate flavor, but they also have really great flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. They got it all. They got it there for you. And you don't have to wait anymore. And if you don't have to go to built.com and wait and order a box and wait for it to come, you can go to your local Sam's or Walmart, go to the pharmacy section and check out Built Bars. They got 4-bar boxes. They got 13-bar boxes. They got great flavors, like I mentioned earlier: churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. And then they're always coming out with different flavors throughout the year. So right now, go to your local Sam's or Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, get you a box of Built Bars, and thank us later. All right, we are back. Real quick, thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects with host Lindsey Crosby. He's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. All right, so we had a question from a listener on Instagram. Sorry, I know Instagram has been a little bit slow for us. We haven't really utilized it, but we're going to utilize it now. And we had a question from Billy Martinez. He says, when the Dodgers return to Southern California at the end of March for the Exhibition Freeway Series, what two position players and two pitchers will have raised their stock the most with strong spring training performances? I'm going to start off with the two position players. And this one, there's only so many answers. Is Freddie Freeman going to, surprise, or what the wording was, raise their stock the most? Is Freddie Freeman going to raise his stock? Not necessarily. Is Mookie Betts going to raise his stock? Not really. Is Will Smith going to raise his stock? Not really. But, other guys, Max Muncy, is he going to raise his stock? JD Martinez? Like, no, not necessarily. But of the handful of ones we have, I don't know. I'm going to ride on the James Outman train here, and I'm going to say that James Outman solidifies his role on the Dodgers. So the other day, Dave Roberts talked about the outfield, and after the signing of Peralta, you got Peralta, you got Chris Taylor, you got Mookie Betts. Those are three for sure guys that are going to be on the roster. And then you basically have five guys competing for two spots, which is essentially what Roberts conceded between Outman, Trace Thompson, Jason Hayward, Steven Duggar, and Bradley Zimmer. And of those guys, I think James Outman's going to be a guy that stands out this spring. Now, is that necessarily going to mean that he's going to be good in the regular season? I don't know. In the spring, you're seeing, if he gets starts in spring, he's going to see starting pitchers from other teams. But those starting pitchers aren't always necessarily going full board, throwing their full stuff. They might be working on something. They might be trying to locate fastballs, so they're throwing a lot more fastballs, or they might be, tinkering, whatever the case is. So, I think James Outman can be a guy that punishes mistakes, as we saw last year when he first came up and started off really hot. He can punish mistakes. And in spring training, for the most part, you're going to get a lot of mistake pitches. And I think that's somewhere where James Outman can thrive. Now, where I really want to see him is in the outfield. We didn't get to see too much of it last year. I know he's an above average athlete. I know people think, he can be a pretty good center fielder, but I do want to see how he is in center field. The Dodgers don't necessarily have anyone that's like, oh my God, this guy's a gold glove center fielder. Now, guys like Hayward, guys like Zimmer, maybe a little bit known more for defense at this point in their career. Definitely Zimmer, and maybe even Hayward, depending how he feels. Trace Thompson is solid, but not going to win any gold gloves. Chris Taylor might be their best center fielder at the moment, just based on major league experience, but that doesn't mean that James Outman can outplay him. And yeah, I'm going to be looking for how he plays center field. And then at the plate, I think he's a guy that can thrive in a spring role. But, that's an easy answer, but that is the answer I have because he is one of those guys that's on the bubble. Gavin Lux even if Gavin Lux raises his stock, he's not going to be anything more than the everyday shortstop for the Dodgers as he's supposed to be. Now, obviously, he can lower that stock or play, I don't know how bad he'd have to play in order for him to not be the everyday shortstop. But either way, James Outman, I think he's one of the guys that raises his stock. And when we come back, he's going to be either the starting center fielder or he's going to be a center fielder, competing for center fielder, competing for at bats, or at least on the roster in one of those two spots that are left. So that's where I'm at on one of them, James Outman. I think the other one, and another easy one, and this is one where he might raise his stock only in the sense of how excited we are as fans to see him, and that's Miguel Vargas. Because Miguel Vargas at this point is penciled in as the Dodgers almost everyday second baseman, essentially. Now, obviously, same thing as Outman is defensively. We want to see how he does at second base. But from everything we've heard this offseason, where, Miguel Vargas has been working at second base the whole time. As soon as they got Miguel Rojas, he hit him up and he worked out with Miguel Rojas. And Miguel Rojas, had to keep it didn't say that he was bad on defense, but the wording was he still figuring himself out as who he wants to be as a defender, but he's willing to put in the work, and he, looked good or looked solid, whatever the wording was. But with Vargas at this point, it's almost like you're starting the Rookie of the Year campaign. Now, this isn't, Rookie of the Year is an interesting award just because guys that have won it don't necessarily turn out to be really good major leaguers, and guys that have not won it have turned out to be really good major leaguers consistently. But I think Miguel Vargas is one of the guys, and we talked about this on the other day of the Dodgers are maybe pushing a little bit, getting out there in the spotlight. He seems comfortable with it, and he's the guy that I think is going to surprise us at second base. I think he's going to be completely competent at second base, making occasional good play here and there, and it's gonna look good. Now at the plate is same thing as Outman, where these guys that have done very well at AAA, you get a lot more mistakes because you're getting guys that aren't necessarily. Sometimes they're younger guys that are still learning, or they're guys that are basically just waiting for an injury in order. They're not good enough to be on the major league roster full time, but they're good enough to be on a major league roster once there's injuries to that roster. And I think Miguel Vargas can thrive in that role as well because he's going to be seen. Like I said, you see starting pitchers, but you don't see starting pitchers going, 100%. And if you do see them going 100%, then yeah, you're gonna see that test there and see what these guys can really do. But I think, similar to Outman, Vargas is a guy that can punish mistakes, and he's going to look good this offseason, this spring training. And he's going to raise his stock, not in the sense of on the team, like he's not on the bubble to make the team, but he's going to raise his stock in terms of how excited us Dodger fans are, and realistically what his chances are of being Rookie of the Year, or coming out of the gate being a top Rookie of the Year candidate. Now he's already, in the betting world and some betting odds, he's already at least top 3 for betting odds and Rookie of the Year in a lot of different places. But you know that doesn't necessarily mean anything if you don't put in the work and you don't do it on the field. So yeah, I don't know. It was hard not to have easy answers, but Outman and Vargas, I think, are two guys that we can trust in. Hopefully, I've been wrong before, but I don't hope I'm wrong this time. And I think by the time we come back from spring training, by the time the Dodgers come back, I think Miguel Vargas is going to be getting that Rookie of the Year buzz already. And you're going to see James Outman at least on the roster, maybe even the starting center fielder for the Dodgers on opening day. So that's it there. We're going to talk about the two pitchers that I believe can raise their stock the most. First, let's talk about FanDuel, because today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And the midway point of the NBA season here, you got NBA All-Star this weekend. You got, a bunch of trades happening in the NBA, so there's going to be a lot of movement the rest of the day. But FanDuel is here to help you out, make your bets, place your bets. And right now, they got the no sweat first bet for up to $1,000 when you download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sportsbook. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel sportsbook. Sorry, and it's super easy, safe, secure, easy to use. You can bet on everything from money line to point scores to threes drained. You can even always hit those same game parlays. You can bet on who's going to hit the first bucket of a game. There's a lot to get into here, but let's just look at this weekend. You got the NBA odds, you got the All-Star weekend, and you got the All-Star game. You got the three-point contest. Damian Lillard is plus 470. I'd put money on Damian Lillard to win the three-point contest at plus 470. That means if you put $100 down, you can get $470 in addition to your original $100. But you can also, if you lose, no sweat, because the no sweat first bet gets you up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's finish up today's episode talking about the two pitchers I believe that'll raise their stock the most this spring. And one guy again, it's hard to not have easy answers or, you know, standard answers here. Is it going to be Julio Diaz? Is it going to be Clayton Kershaw? No. Is it going to be, Evan Phillips? No. He can't look that much better than he did last year unless he's throwing like 105. But I think Noah Syndergaard's going to be that guy. Then, like I said, this one doesn't necessarily raise his stock in terms of, oh, he's going to make the roster or, oh, he's competing for a spot. Noah Syndergaard's basically been assured a spot in the rotation already. But I do think we're going to get Noah Syndergaard more from the Mets rather than more of the Noah Syndergaard we saw last year with the Phillies and Angels, which is a Noah Syndergaard that doesn't necessarily throw as hard, that is a little bit more of a pitcher, and that doesn't strike out as many. I think we're going to get a Noah Syndergaard that does throw harder, that does strike out more, and that has now had a year under his belt where he became more of a pitcher. And if you bring some of that power back and he knows how to be a pitcher, then you're going to get a Noah Syndergaard that's pretty good. And I think he's going to raise his stock to, every year the Dodgers seemingly have a guy that's kind of a surprise all-star. Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, Tyler Anderson last year. They always have one of those guys. And it's hard to always count on that to happen. But I do think legitimately Noah Syndergaard can be one of those guys. And it wouldn't necessarily be a complete surprise. Obviously, we know we've seen him dominate MLB before. We've seen him dominate on the mound, but we didn't see it last year. He was basically a 3, 4, 5 starter last year, depending on how good or how bad your team is. And he was kind of middle of the pack, middle of the road. But I do think velocity wise, he's going to be back up there. I do think he's going to mix in what he learned last year in terms of pitching. Obviously, there's going to be things that the Dodgers have in mind for him in terms of pitch sequencing or pitch, selection, or how he attacks hitters, or how they're going to get him to build out to be able to go through a lineup 2-3 times a game, and all that. Believing in Mark Pryor, believing in Noah Syndergaard's arm, believing in just the power of the Dodgers that we've seen the last few years. I think he's going to be a guy that he does not, like I said, it's not going to surprise people. But I do think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be like, man, maybe we should have offered him more money, or maybe we should have done more. And I'm excited because, I've always liked Noah Syndergaard since he came up. I've always wanted him on the Dodgers. I believe there's tweets from back in a few years ago when he was kind of rumored that he might get traded, that I wanted the Dodgers to go and get him. And now they have him. And it's it's kind of like, in the Marvel movies, if you've seen, there's I don't know the names of all the movies, but I know in one of them, there's Fat Thor. And Syndergaard wasn't fat last year, but he was, not physically top shelf Thor. He was a shell of himself a little bit. And I think we're going to get normal Thor, a little bit more this year. So that's one of the guys I believe is going to raise his stock a little bit. And honestly, now that the signing is official and we heard he's full go, hey, why not Jimmy Nelson be that second guy of who's going to raise his stock the most? Now, Jimmy Nelson signed a major league deal, so for all intents and purposes, he's going to be on the major league roster. But is he going to be a guy that pitches mop-up duty or pitches the sixth inning of a game, or is he going to be a guy that's going to be in the thick of things? And I think he can be a guy that's going to be in the thick of things. We talked about the bullpen and the closers the other day, and the Dodgers don't necessarily have a set closer, and they're not planning on having one. But, Evan Phillips is probably their best reliever at the moment. You got Alex Vesia, you got Bruce Graterol, you got Yency Almonte, guys that were pretty solid, that assuming they're going to be solid again. You got Daniel Hudson, who has closer experience and has been really good in the past, but he's coming off ACL surgery. You have all these guys that fit the fit the bullpen right now. Jimmy Nelson can be a guy that gets himself up there with Evan Phillips and with, Vesia, Graterol, Yency Almonte. I think he can be a guy that ends up becoming your second or third best reliever in general. And we've seen it before. We saw him do it with the Dodgers. Like I said, he struck out almost 40% of batters, 38% of batters nearly. He had a ground ball rate of around 30-some percent. So if he wasn't grounding out or striking out for the most part, he did have a little bit issue with control. He did issue some walks, but for the most part, he was really, really, really good when he was healthy with the Dodgers. And if he's fully healthy and we haven't heard any reports of anything other than the Dodgers signed him, which means they must have seen him throw, which means they must have seen that he looks fine and that they have belief in him. So I think out of spring, we're going to see Jimmy Nelson like, oh, yeah, he's going to be one of the guys that's pitching the seventh, eighth, ninth inning with the Dodgers. He's going to be one of those guys that comes in with bases loaded, nobody out to get out of a jam. He's going to be one of those guys that Dave Roberts really trusts. And I think the best part about this roster with the Dodgers in terms of the bullpen is, you look at you got Yency Almonte, you got Brusdar Graterol, you got Daniel Hudson, you got or Shelby Miller, you got Jimmy Nelson, you got Evan Phillips, and then you got Alex Vesia. That's 7 relievers right there that I'd feel comfortable putting in pretty much any situation because, well, Shelby Miller, we still remains to be seen, but we're expecting the Mark Pryor / Dodgers magic to work on him. That's 7 deep of guys I'd feel comfortable. 1, closing the game. 2, coming into a game of runners on base in a big situation. And 3, basically pitching whenever they need. Not a lot of teams have that. Some teams are a little bit more built. They have 2, 3 dominant guys, and then they just have a couple guys that can be good or cannot be good. You never know. And then now guys like Phil Bickford, who spent a lot of time on the roster the last couple of years, guys like Justin Brew, who spent some time on the roster the last couple of years, Caleb Ferguson, who, came back from Tommy John, didn't look great. Maybe, this might be a year where he kind of emerges and becomes a guy again, even though last year, his ERA, he was never a dominant force. He just, pitched pretty well. And then at the end, he didn't pitch as well. So, the Dodgers bullpen is stacked, and it's hard. You could pick pretty much any one of those guys, and I think realistically they could raise their stock. Yency Almonte was already good, but he could raise his stock even more in terms of being the Dodgers' second best reliever. Everyone's basically competing to be behind Evan Phillips as the second best reliever. I think Jimmy Nelson can be there, and I think Jimmy Nelson can show that. And I'm excited to see what he looks like. This is, spring training for the Dodgers. Like I said, it's fun when it first comes back. Yeah, the guys are playing, but we haven't necessarily had to put too much stock into anything like, oh, maybe the last couple of years, how does Gavin Lux look? Oh, how does so-and-so look in the bullpen? But for the most part, we know everything that's coming. This is the first year where, there are more unknowns than normal, and we are going to get some looks at guys that we're actually going to be watching the games and analyzing and seeing, okay, what are they doing? And in spring, it's still hard. If Jimmy Nelson comes out and struggles, 1, he hasn't pitched in a long time because he had Tommy John surgery. 2, he might be trying to find his feel for those things. And 3, especially with relievers and pitchers in general, we don't know what they're working on or what they're trying to get out of this spring. Some guys are just making sure that their field is right. They have their pitches working, their pitch grips, and everything else. That's more guys like Julio. And then you're going to get guys that are maybe working on a different pitch or working on locating certain pitches. So they're going to throw, maybe there's somebody that comes in and throws 6 curveballs in a row because they're working on locating their curveball or throwing the curveball for a strike. Maybe there's guys that come in and they throw their whole inning and throwing nothing but fastballs, and they're working on fastball location and moving it up, down, left, right, whatever the case is. So, it's going to be hard, but this is the first year where spring training means a little bit more than before. Not necessarily, roster spots other than the outfield. Roster spots are all but assured for pretty much everyone that's going to be signed to a major league deal. It's just a matter of the last couple of spots and the ranking of the bullpen. So it's going to be fun to watch. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects with host Lindsey Crosby. He's a prospect encyclopedia. You can find those shows wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers, which is how you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Jeff on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Text my advice play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.